It's lovely to speak with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tell me how you came to be living in...
A very long story that I will cut short. I
No,
was
not too
born in
short. We have
Burundi.
time. No, not too short. We've got
Oh,
time. We're not in a hurry. Take your
great.
time.
Nice. Okay, yes, I was born in Burundi. That is a small country, I would say, in East Africa, sandwiched between the DRC or the Congo and Tanzania. It was a colony of Belgium until, I guess, 1962. And I would say since then, it has been at war with itself for the last few decades. So I grew up in a period of conflict and was forced outside of the country. After high school, moved through different countries, Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, settled in South Africa for about 9 years where I did my studies, and finally moved in 2010. So yeah, over time, I tried to rebuild my life through education, and now I work partly as an interpreter, supporting refugees and migrants, navigating new systems.
When you said you were in South Africa for 9 years and doing your studies, what were your studies, or were you just you were going through schooling?
I schooled in Burundi and I left after that.
Yes.
So in South Africa, I actually did surprisingly a degree in electrical engineering,
Oh, there you go.
which is what helped me move because at that time they were looking for engineers.
So, what inspired you to get into translating and interpreting as a line of work?
There was a time where I had a friend of mine and they were working at a refugee center and they said they were receiving a lot of migrants from my region. I speak a few languages in the region, and the region has been in a conflict. As I said, the DRC, for instance, it has been like 30 years old, 30 odd years of conflict, and people moved from DRC to Rwanda to different countries, and they are coming. They only speak their native language, which I don't understand. And they said they were desperately looking for people to help, not just interpreting as such, but really help refugees to understand the systems here and to help them settle. So I jumped into the role and I have been into it since then.
Yeah. Now, you said that you speak a few languages in the region. How many languages do you speak, and how similar or different are they to each other?
I do speak 4 African language. I would say Kirundi and the Kinyarwanda, they are kind of similar. Then Swahili is different, and it's got also 2 versions. There is a Swahili spoken in Congo and the Swahili spoken in Tanzania, for instance, and we get both those type of interpreting. And then French, because we were a colony of Belgium, so we learned French in school. So I do Kirundi, Kinyarwanda, Kiswahili, both flavors, and French, translating into English.
Wow.
So 4 of those.
So 4 of those. And you picked those up along the way. So as you were saying, the time you spent in East Africa, then in South Africa. So is that how you were able to pick up and speak these languages and pretty much, be
Pretty much,
multilingual?
yes, except Kirundi is my mother tongue. French is our language of education. So those, I studied them formally. The rest, I picked them as I went. Yep.
Yeah. Can you just remind me? I don't think I picked it up. How long have you been in this line of work as an interpreter?
Sharply before around 2018, yeah, I started in 2018 as a formal interpreting. Otherwise, I've been interpreting informally in
Informally, yeah.
churches, in organization, NGOs, and the
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And who are the kinds of people you are primarily working with at the moment?
At the moment, mainly refugees coming from those regions, particularly Rwanda and the DRC or the Congo, the Republic Democratic of Congo. They have some are newcomers navigating through systems like work and income, or for the case of Australia, Centrelink. But healthcare, the police, the justice system. Some Australians I'm dealing with are just connecting the services with AGL for power and origin and other services providers.
Mm.
Some counseling systems, different type of services that refugees do need, and they do need this
Yeah.
sort of language assistance.
So these are some of the things they need support with during, not just after the migration process.
It could be as long as 20 years. There are people who have been in these countries for very long and they haven't been able to master the language and the system and they still need assistance. So it could be a new person, but it could also be somebody who has been in Australia for quite some years.
Mm.
But because they came at an older age and they didn't do any form of education back home, it is really hard to pick up a new language at a certain age. So they still need that support
Yeah.
for a longer term than normal.
Now, Bede, you'll be in Sydney from May the 3rd to the 6th to speak at a refugee trauma recovery conference. Can you tell me about the sorts of talks that will be taking place at that conference?
So the conference is called Australia and the New Zealand Refugee Trauma Recovery in Resettlement Conference. Quite a mouthful. And I think it's a lot of pretty much to do with the recovery, with the resettlement of refugees. We have got a pretty seasoned speakers. I can see Dr. Alice Edwards, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture
Mhm.
and other cruel or inhumane treatment. We've got Honorable Ryan Park, the MP, the Minister of Health for New South Wales, and the other dignitaries and universities, people from NGOs working with refugees and migrants.
Mm.
Yeah, quite a number of speakers
Yes.
and a lot of sessions for 3 days.
And what is something people overlook when discussing the refugee experience?
There are a few things they overlook. The one thing I have seen most of organizations do overlook is that those refugees, although they do need a quick emergency recovery system, they were humans. They are humans.
Mhm.
They were people in their countries who were maybe teachers,
Yeah.
farmers, or whatever. And although it is good to treat them as a survivor in the first 3 to 4 years, they often overlook going or beyond and help them integrate in the community, be part of the community, participate into arts and the culture. And my talk will particularly be about the storytelling for refugees or just supporting refugees to get to full emancipation, full participation, not just someone who needs a hand, who needs help.
Right. Okay. So what you're saying there is that yes, they are, humans who had lives in their home country. You mentioned teachers and farmers, and then coming here, there's a phase in which yes, it's survival and it's the help that's required to get them back on their
Yeah,
feet. And you're saying after that, that's where I suppose the overlooking can take place in terms of integrating them into the community and I suppose moving past that helping hand aspect. Is that what you're sort of homing in on?
that's correct. Yes,
Mm.
that's definitely that helps the full integration into society. It requires a sort of holistic view of refugee, look into their potential and where they can grow, rather and where they can make a sort of contribution to society, rather than a sort of a burden or just
Mm.
waiting for handouts all the time. Yes.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you point that out. I think of my own family. Well, I mean, my mother, for instance, didn't come as a refugee specifically, but still came to Australia escaping a war, just like, your experience, not too dissimilar. That was a long time ago, that is sort of early 80s. But what you're saying now is very much so um, the same sentiment that my mother's generation here, my mother herself would also kind of echo. She will continuously talk about, she loves Australia and talks about how she would never turn her back on Australia. It's kept her alive and surviving and being able to build a life. And, she went from job to job a few times, some of them in a factory, some of them a little bit more aligned with her experience back in her home country. But I'm just reflecting out loud, I suppose, what you're saying now in 2026 and that back in the early 80s, it's interesting. It doesn't anecdotally feel like a sense that we've progressed from there.
I would think we've made some progress. I think most organizations and the government departments have kind of learned probably from early refugee settlements. Now we are seeing some programs where refugees are quickly given opportunities to learn, to have new skills. They are asked what they were doing back home,
Yeah.
what they would want to do, and they are supported to do so. So I can see a lot of progress here. For instance, Salvation Army does
Yes.
run a lot of workshops on employment and job opportunities and the
And
career and all
yeah,
that sort of stuff.
and you're right, the Salvation Army, and then within the community, the same sort of community as well, where they band together and help each other through this. But yes, but maybe interesting to sort of just think about it from on a much larger scale as well. It's just interesting. You've made me think about it. It's interesting to think about. How did you pick up the English language, Bede?
Again, probably through, we kind of did a bit of English schooling back home, just the classroom,
Oh, yeah?
ABCD, and the grammar.
Okay.
But as I said, I spent 9 years in South Africa. It was a struggle in the first couple of years. I remember going to college and the professor thinking I was dumb because I couldn't really express what I was doing. It wasn't hard doing engineering because a lot of mathematics and the engineering principles look the same. You don't need a high level of English.
Right.
But when it came to presentation, I was like trying to mumble jumble stuff, and he was like, "But how did you write this test?" So yeah, it's through hardships. So I learned as I went.
Yeah.
I didn't do a lot of formal classroom English. I think speaking and forcing
Yes.
myself through books and the studying and the participating in the communities helped me be where I am
It's the
now.
best way. It's the best way to do it, to be able to speak the language for sure. Now, just going back on what we were talking about with, something, or a few things people overlook when discussing the refugee experience. How does being able to express yourself properly help someone who is caught in the middle of that experience?
It does definitely help to be able to express oneself. It's a part of the healing process. Really, most of the frustration you have when you're an adult is you've got adult thoughts, but you've got a sort of a child dictionary. So you want to say, but you can't say what you want to say, and
Right.
people don't understand you. So sometimes people keep just silent. They don't want to say what they would have to say. And even with an interpreter, there are things that are intimate. It takes a lot of time for people to open up to a third person. It is easier to open up to a doctor and tell them about your issues, or another therapist. But if there's another person in between, it can become quite an issue, especially with cultures like ours that are very introvert. They are very they want to keep their lives to themselves, and they are closing it. They are scared if that information leaks into the community, they may be a sort of pariah. So there is that frustration where you want to say something, but you can't say it. But also the expressing yourself, watching a movie, enjoying it, going to a party and having conversations. As I said, some people, they had qualification, they have philosophies of their own. Everybody does.
Yeah.
And they would love to express them freely, but then we don't have the vocabulary to express those. So that pretty much frustrating. And when you go past that stage, then it is very interesting to open up to I do some sort of writing sometimes. I'm writing a memoir, and as I write down and I can remember those terms, it kind of a closure, like I can revive that moment and I can sort of think, oh, I passed this is behind me. I can put it on paper now.
Mm.
So personally, as a person who likes to express myself, and I think the majority of people would love to, it is good when you come to pass that language, barrier language, and you express yourself. I haven't talked about the job opportunities and the career opportunities and all of that. I'm just talking from a sort of a personal
Yes.
level view. But when it comes to jobs, it's one thing, it's another level.
So, on that, what role does language play in recovery and getting over some of the trauma that can come with moving to a new place?
First of all, it's a sort of from a formal way perspective, being able to talk to the clinician in a language they understand without an intermediary. That's very important.
Yeah.
But informally, also, there are stories we'd love to say to tell people, but we can't talk about that because people don't understand us, and the people who understand us are probably as traumatized as us. So there's nothing they can add to our suffering or our recovery. I do remember in South Africa, I was going to a certain community and I get to know somebody who was really, really nice and intelligent and wise. I would pick up a phone anytime I'm in trouble. I'm not in a good mindset. I
Yeah.
would talk to them for a while. And I remember one day I said, I told them, this is really worrying me. I'm always thinking this way and that way. And I remember what she said. I will never forget. I said, you know what it is? That's a normal reaction to abnormal circumstances. So being able to have somebody to talk to
Of
who
course.
is looking from afar from the troubles, it helps the healing process along with the formal clinical sort of recovery therapies, yes.
Mm. And Bede, what progress and changes have you seen from the time you started work in this space, so 2018, and what are you hoping to see further in future?
I think they are starting to understand who is a refugee. I was in a conference on interpreting in September last year in Wellington. I talked on interpreting the refugee context, and I saw there were people interested in listening to what I was saying.
Mm.
There was a PhD done by a French lady also on refugees and interpreting in New Zealand. Now they do start to understand who is a refugee, what do we expect, and when they in front of a doctor, for instance, I can see the doctors are aware that this person probably isn't as knowledgeable as a New Zealander or a Kiwi. When they are talking about medical terms,
Mm.
they take it very slow. That's one. And I also see a sort of understanding there's a sort of a second-hand trauma refugees and interpreters can get. So we get some sort of debriefing before the interpreting if they know it's a heavy subject. And after the clinician will check on the interpreter, are you okay? Anything?
Mm.
Because they know we kind of absorbing this second-hand trauma, which we probably have lived ourselves in the past. And that sort of reviving it can be a bit traumatic at the same time.
Of
So I
course.
can set over changes, including, as I said, trying to support refugees to be integrated, to be on their feet as soon as they can, depending on their potential.
Yeah, wow. And what do you love most about your job?
It is quite satisfying to see people express themselves. And interpreting my context is not just words, it's not word per word, it's
That's right.
also it's a bit of a conflict between the standards set up by the body like Nati and the stuff. It's
Hmm.
where you have to just do your job, but you can't do your job. You first with a customer coming from Congo has never seen electricity before, and they have to choose between different plans from AGL, and they don't understand what those plans are,
Mm.
and they want you to kind of hold their hands and direct them. So it is rewarding in that sense. There are also areas where refugees are being interviewed in a refugee camp somewhere in Africa or somewhere else. And 4 months down the line, they are here and, oh, I've seen you before. And it feels like you are part of the team that helped them settle down
That's
here. So
awesome.
quite satisfying. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's fantastic. It's been wonderful to speak with you and hear about your experience and all the work that you're doing. Of course, all the best with the continued work, the importance of your work, and also, of course, when next month comes around, the Refugee Trauma Recovery Conference. Enjoy that, and all the best for your speaking gig at that one as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on ABC Radio's National Weekend Evenings.